They called him the Rider. No one knew his name. He came alone. When he left, the land never healed quite right. The scars of his passing etched deep into the sun-baked earth. He was a whisper carried on the wind, a shadow against the dying light. Those who saw him knew deep in their bones something unnatural was about to unfold. He rode into towns where hope had long since withered, places where the last prayers had been swallowed by the dust, places where the air itself seemed to hum with an ancient, malevolent energy. His arrival was not sought nor welcomed, but it was inevitable in places where the veil between worlds thinned to a gossamer thread. His arrival in Bloodwater Gulch was no different. The gulch wasn't much more than a jagged cut in the earth, a place where the sun beat down with relentless cruelty and the wind carried the scent of dry rot and desperation. A dozen ramshackle buildings clung to the dusty slopes, their timbers bleached and cracked, looking as though they might crumble into splinters at any moment. The creek, the namesake of the gulch, trickled sluggishly through the bottom, its water a brackish red, not from the iron in the soil, but from something far more unsettling. The air hung thick and heavy, silent save for the creak of a distant windmill and the mournful cry of a lone hawk circling overhead. It was a place that felt forgotten by God, a place where the last whispers of sanity had been drowned in the crimson flow of the creek. The rider dismounted, his movements economical, a lean figure against the vast, indifferent sky. His duster, travel-stained and worn, seemed to absorb the light, making him appear even more a part of the shadows that lengthened as the sun dipped lower. His face, when glimpsed beneath the brim of his hat, was a map of old wounds and unyielding resolve. His eyes the color of storm clouds that had seen too much. He led his horse, a sturdy roan with a patient demeanor, through the deserted main street. Doors were closed, windows shuttered, not a soul stirred. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy silence of a place holding its breath, a silence that spoke of unspeakable terrors and a deep, abiding fear. The only sounds were the soft crunch of his boots on the parched earth and the gentle jingle of his horse's bridle. Every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe, animated by an unseen presence, a feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. He stopped in front of the saloon, its sign creaking in the faint breeze, a grimacing skull painted above the faded letters. Pushing open the swinging doors, he stepped into the gloom. The air inside was cool, still, carrying the stale scent of whiskey and fear, thick and cloying. A few overturned chairs lay scattered. A broken bottle glinted under a shaft of dust-filled light. Behind the bar, a figure slumped, half hidden by shadow. The rider approached slowly, his hand resting on the pommel of the worn revolver at his hip. It was the barkeep, or what was left of him. His skin was the color of old parchment, drawn taut over bone. His eyes, wide and staring, were milky white, reflecting nothing. But it was the other detail that made even the rider pause, a grim tightening around his lips. The barkeep's mouth was stretched impossibly wide, split from ear to ear, as if he had died screaming a silent, unending scream. And from his mouth, a single black feather protruded, slick and glistening with a viscous fluid that was not blood. The sight was unsettling, a violation of the natural order, a sign of something ancient and malevolent at work. The rider moved through the gulch, each step measured, each sense alert, like a predator tracking its prey. He found more of them. A woman in the general store, her face contorted in a rictus of terror, a feather emerging from her throat. Her hands were clutched to her chest, as if in a desperate final prayer. A young man, slumped in the dusty street, his body twisted into a grotesque, unnatural position, a feather piercing his temple. His eyes were wide with a terror that seemed to linger even in death. In each instance, the same impossibly wide, screaming mouth, the same black feather, impossibly sleek and dark. The creek, he noticed, truly was red, a deep, viscous crimson that swirled slowly, carrying with it the faint, sickly sweet odor of iron and something else, something cloying and ancient. A scent that prickled at the back of his throat. It was the smell of corrupted life, of vital essence twisted and turned to unnatural purposes. He walked past the miner's shack, its door ajar. The stench of something truly foul, something putrid and unnatural, wafted out. He didn't need to look inside. The silence was explanation enough. He passed the smithy, its forge cold, the hammer abandoned on the anvil, No life, no movement, just the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls, a mournful lament. The fear in this gulch wasn't just in the corpses. It was woven into the very fabric of the air, a thick, palpable dread that clung to everything. He followed the trail of feathers and macabre breadcrumb path to the small, weathered church at the edge of town. Its steeple leaned precariously, a cross at its apex silhouetted against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. The front doors hung open, revealing a yawning blackness within. The air here was colder, charged with a palpable dread, a hum that seemed to vibrate through the earth beneath his feet. The silence here was different from the rest of the gulch. It was a profound, unnatural stillness, a silence that felt heavy with unspeakable acts. The rider drew his revolver. The click of the hammer loud in the oppressive stillness, a stark, metallic sound that seemed to shatter the pervasive quiet. Inside, the horror escalated. The pews were overturned, splintered, and tossed aside as if by an unseen, violent force. The altar was desecrated, its sacred cloth ripped and stained with what looked like dried blood and a viscous, dark residue. A crude, unsettling effigy, fashioned from twisted branches and animal bones, hung from the rafters, swaying almost imperceptibly in a non-existent breeze. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but distorted, with too many limbs and an unnerving, empty gaze. And on the floor, arranged in a grotesque circle, were the remaining townsfolk. They were all dead, their faces contorted in expressions of ultimate terror, their mouths ripped open in that same impossibly wide, silent scream, each adorned with a single black feather. But unlike the others he had found, these bodies pulsed faintly, a low, rhythmic thrumming that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards, a slow, sickening heartbeat from within the grave. Their eyes, though lifeless, seemed to follow his movements, their silent screams echoing in the oppressive air. Then he saw it. In the center of the circle, kneeling, was a figure. It was the preacher, his back to the rider. He was chanting a low, guttural sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality, a cadence that was both ancient and utterly alien. His hands were clasped, covered in blood, and the black, viscous fluid that stained the feathers. From his own mouth, a multitude of black feathers streamed, writhing like grotesque worms, pushing their way out with disturbing force. As the rider watched, horrified, a cold knot forming in his gut, the preacher began to transform. His skin stretched, his bones groaned with sickening pops and cracks, his body elongating, twisting into something no longer human, something monstrous and blasphemous. Black feathers sprouted from his flesh, growing larger, thicker, their barbs sharp and glistening. Until he was no longer a man, but a monstrous, feathered abomination. His eyes burning with an unholy, malevolent light, fixed on some unseen point beyond the desecrated altar. The very air around him seemed to warp and shimmer, the scent of death and corruption growing stronger, a suffocating presence. The creature shrieked, a sound that ripped through the air, vibrating in the rider's very bones, a sound of pure, unadulterated hatred and primordial rage. It lunged, its feathered limbs impossibly fast, a blur of dark motion. Its talons extended, each one a gleaming, razor-sharp hook. The rider fired, the shot echoing like thunder in the enclosed space, the blast briefly illuminating the horror before him. The bullet struck the creature, but it seemed to absorb the impact, barely flinching. A low growl rumbling in its chest, he fired again and again, the heavy slugs tearing at its corrupted flesh, sending plumes of black feathers exploding into the air, each feather leaving a lingering trace of dark energy. The creature roared, a sound of ancient fury, and closed the distance with terrifying speed. Its talons outstretched, he ducked under a sweeping claw, the wind of its passage chilling him to the bone, a foul, stale breath washing over him. He fired at its head, aiming for the glowing eyes, but the creature was too quick, its movements blurring, a grotesque dance of death. He felt a searing pain as a talon raked across his side, tearing through his duster and the flesh beneath. A burning line of agony. He stumbled back, gritting his teeth, the metallic tang of his own blood filling his mouth. This was no ordinary monster, no mere beast of the wild. This was something born of a deeper, older darkness. Something that fed on despair and desecration. A thing from outside the world. Its presence was a palpable weight, pressing down on him, trying to crush his will. Knowing a direct assault with his limited ammunition was futile, The rider looked for an opening, a weakness, his mind racing even as his body screamed in protest. The creature was radiating an oppressive aura, a wave of pure malevolence that threatened to crush him, to drive him to his knees. He noticed the effigy, still swaying from the rafters, its crude form casting long, distorted shadows, drawing his gaze like a magnet. There was something about it, a resonance, a connection to the abomination before him, a palpable sense of shared energy. He realized with a chilling certainty that the effigy was not just a decoration. It was a conduit, a tether to whatever dark power was animating the preacher, a vile anchor to this world.
This is its root,
the rider rasped, his voice low and gravely, the words barely audible over the creature's guttural growls. He wiped a trickle of blood from his lips with the back of his hand, his eyes never leaving the swaying effigy. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, the rider dodged another attack, diving low and rolling behind a fallen pew, the rotten wood splintering around him. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the burning pain in his side, the wound a dull throb beneath his duster. He fired at the effigy. The first shot missed, kicking up splinters from the wooden rafter above. But the second struck true. The twisted branches splintered, and a high-pitched, unearthly shriek tore from the creature's throat, a sound of agony and rage. It recoiled, its glowing eyes fixed on the damaged effigy, a flicker of something akin to panic, a momentary weakness in their depths. He kept firing methodically, relentlessly, his hands steady despite the trembling in his limbs, aiming for the effigy. Each shot that struck it sent a ripple of agony through the creature, its movements becoming more erratic, its roars less powerful, its feathered body twitching uncontrollably. As the effigy began to break apart, piece by piece, its grotesque form disintegrating, the creature's form started to waver, to shimmer, as if struggling to maintain its hold on this reality, its outlines blurring. Finally, with a desperate, guttural cry, the rider fired his last bullet, a prayer and a curse, shattering the effigy completely. The last twisted bone snapped, and the effigy fell to the ground in a pile of dust and splinters. The creature screamed, a sound that was less a shriek and more a wail of pure, unadulterated anguish, a cry of profound loss and unmaking. Its body convulsed, shedding feathers like autumn leaves in a strong wind. Then, with a horrifying pop, it imploded, dissolving into a cloud of black dust and a faint, acrid smell of ozone and decay, as if a great ancient fire had been extinguished. The air shimmered once more, then settled, leaving behind only the cold emptiness. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the rider's ragged breathing and the distant creak of the windmill. A lonely, mournful sound. He stood amidst the carnage, the air thick with the lingering scent of unnatural death, of something that should not have been. His side throbbed, a steady, aching reminder of how close he had come, a cold sweat chilling him despite the oppressive heat of the gulch. He surveyed the desecrated church, the bodies of the townsfolk, their silent screams etched into their faces, the lingering shadow of the horror that had unfolded. The light from the setting sun, now filtering through the shattered windows, cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to dance with malicious glee. Bloodwater Gulch was quiet once more, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was the silence of a place forever changed, forever tainted. A place where the air itself seemed to hum with a residue of malevolence. The red water in the creek seemed to pulse with a deeper, more ominous hue, reflecting the bruised twilight sky, a constant reminder of the blood that had flowed there. The rider knew the land would never heal quite right here. The darkness had been driven back, but it had left its indelible mark, a wound in the world that might never truly close. The very stones of the gulch seemed to mourn, to whisper tales of the unspeakable. He tended to his wound, a grimace barely disturbing his weathered features before stepping back outside. The last rays of the sun were fading, casting the gulch in deep purples and oranges, turning the landscape into a painting of desolation. He walked to his horse, untied the reins, and swung himself into the saddle with a weary groan.
"It will return,"
a low, raspy voice whispered from the darkness of a shadowed doorway he passed. An old man, his face a web of wrinkles, peered out. His eyes wide and haunted, he was the only survivor the rider had seen, perhaps spared by chance, or perhaps for a more sinister reason. The rider turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting the old man's.
Not here. Not soon.
His voice was a low rumble, quiet but firm, carrying a weight that silenced the old man's fear, if only for a moment. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the ravaged town, the still, silent bodies.
What did you see?
The old man trembled, clutching a faded shawl around his shoulders.
Shadows and feathers. Always the feathers. They came from the ground, from the walls, like the gulch was bleeding them.
His voice cracked, dry as dust.
And the preacher, he called to it. He spoke of the blood rite, of making the gulch fertile.
The rider nodded, a grim understanding dawning.
Fertile. Yes. It always wants to grow.
He looked back at the old man, a flicker of something akin to pity in his eyes.
Leave this place. Burn it. Salt the earth. And never look back.
The old man just stared, his eyes reflecting the desolation, a silent plea in their depths. The rider said nothing more. There was nothing more to say. Some wounds were too deep to heal, some places too poisoned to reclaim. He left before dawn, a solitary figure riding away from the silent, ruined town. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky with bruised purples and blood oranges, casting long, distorted shadows before him. He didn't look back. There was nothing left to see, only the lingering dread, the taste of ash and fear on the wind. The rider moved on, a harbinger of the unnatural, leaving behind him a world a little more scarred, a little more cursed, and a little more aware of the ancient evils that stirred beneath the dust of the Old West. And in Bloodwater Gulch, though the creature was gone, a subtle, creeping dread remained, a whisper on the wind, a chilling reminder that some horrors once awakened never truly sleep, and simply wait for the next tide of fear to swell. The earth itself now held a memory of the terror, a silent testament to the price of confronting the unspeakable. If this story left you tasting dust and dread, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss one of the rider's stories. And tell me, if you found Bloodwater Gulch on a map, would you ride toward it or burn the damn thing off the page? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching Cabin of Whispers. See you next time.